Now the moment we've all been waiting for.
I am Nate Riggle, and you are listening to The Way of the Bonfire. Hey, welcome back. We're just going to dive right in today. This podcast is about bringing the world together in better ways so good, hardworking people can finally stop waiting to make the most of their lives. In today's episode, I want to revisit a concept that I mentioned in a previous episode, which is the idea of a fulfillment span. So I just want to quickly recap what that is and what fulfillment is, at least the definition and the meaning that I've got for it, and then explain how I've observed and experimented and identified the key elements of fulfillment. And then at the end, I want to share the recipe, ingredients, or the instructions or the formula for how to combine these things that I've distilled it down to so that you can get to that state on purpose and keep it. And because you can't keep fulfillment unless you understand how it works and intentionally do what's needed to keep it. It's very rarely, and I don't know that it's possible to have consistent fulfillment and have a long fulfillment span unless you're doing something about it intentionally. So quick bit of context on fulfillment and fulfillment span. Lifespan, you should probably know what that is how many years you can expect to live on average based on your genetics and a bunch of other circumstantial and environmental factors. That's a tough one to control. You can do a few things about it. There's a lot of people focused on longevity and that sort of thing. And the other thing that some of those same people are focused on is health span, which I think is a great thing to focus on, which is how many of those years you are physically healthy and able, relatively speaking, to do what you want to do. And you've got some control over that. You can increase how healthy you are at any given time, barring, some major illness and even in that case, there's things you can do. So that's lifespan and health span. Fulfillment span is if you looked at a timeline, how much or what percentage of your lifespan would you say you felt or experienced a state of fulfillment? We have way more control over this than anything else because we can always use our power of choice to determine this. And if we have the right mindset and the right focus, then there's something that we really can do about that. And I've learned so much about that over the last year. I'm going to share maybe more than you wanted to hear about that during this episode, but I think it provides good context if it's your first time listening to the podcast. But also kind of how I landed on these. There's just a few things that really anybody who has any kind of goal or motivation or desires is trying to get. And I kind of feel like I took all these different things and put them in a big centrifuge and spun them around and isolated just, okay, what are the active ingredients in this fulfillment thing? So as you know, words can mean different things to different people. And the word fulfillment is sometimes used interchangeably with words like success or achievement, but it shouldn't be because that just muddles everything up and confuses people and makes the conversation harder. In our way of the bonfire definition or meaning, it's all about how do you keep that sense of completeness and that feeling of being alive and grounded and right where you're supposed to be doing what is best for you and everyone else. Like having that sense of not just status or significance, but real meaning and impact that's resilient and becomes, instead of like that once in a while feeling that you get when things are perfect, that becomes the default state that you always come back to automatically. It's kind of flipping the script. So how you get there is going to look different for everyone in terms of the experiences and the stories and the people along the way. But I found that if you are curious enough and persistent enough, you can find some guiding principle that is the same in anybody's experience. It's kind of that active ingredient that I was talking about. And the formula tells you how to combine the right ingredient to get that fulfillment and to keep it, more importantly. So I'll share with you how I arrived at those components and then how to actually use the formula or follow the instructions to combine the ingredients of fulfillment. And there's so many people in 2024 who feel this sense of something missing from their lives. I'm not trying to be a downer. It's just, it's pervasive, and it seems to be growing. And I've gone through it myself and got blindsided by it in my, my 30s and the last 2022, 2023. And a lot of people who seem to be doing great, or who a lot of people look up to, or even the ones who just seem to be okay, are not even close to happy. For others, it's not that they're not ever happy, or that they don't recognize how many things they do have and that have gone well, but that there is this growing sense of disconnection or loneliness. Like they're successful and social on the outside, but something's permanently off, or they're not themselves, or that they're kind of foggy on finding a good direction on some really important things. And as I mentioned, in 2022 and early 2023, I was dealing with a lot of that myself. And it wasn't really my first round of this, but this time around, I got to the point that it was painful enough for long enough that I had to go down one of two paths. I could just admit that I was defeated and this was my life now. And I could just say to myself, I guess I'll just be a martyr. But even trying to be a martyr, that wasn't helping anyone. I could see that it was still hurting and not building anyone up around me. So that option sucked. So I decided that I was going to go into first find and then slay this mysterious dragon. Like, not maybe I'll see if I can figure this out, and if I do, then I'll be happy. It was, no, I'm going to get to the bottom of this and make a change come hell or high water. And I don't know if the word is determined or obsessed or what it is, but when I lock in on something, I'm a ride or die type of guy. So for the last year, I've spent a lot of time and money and attention and effort and prayer and meditation. And I've done a lot of research of others' research, right? Because you've got all these people who come and say, oh, look, I'm this Harvard whatever, right? And it's great. They've got great neuroscience research. They got all these things. They're doing reviews of their own peer stuff. But who's to say, like, I can't use their work and make my own comparison? Because inside of us, there's this personal compass. And if there's one thing you take away today, it's not all this stuff Nate says must be true. It's learn to follow your internal compass. Not to find your truth or whatever that baloney is, but to find the truth for yourself. And I can't emphasize that enough. It's really easy to get sucked in by somebody's confidence and by the carefully crafted narrative that they're putting out there to tell you, here's your way out of this problem. So before you do it, follow me on anything that I say, make sure that you are learning how to use your internal compass. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But anyway, so I was using mine. I was looking at all these different sort of resources. And since they already did a lot of the work, why not use it and compare it? And I've had countless discussions with the ones in the world who seem to have had this, I wouldn't call it lucky. Like, it seems to be intentional, and they've been able to avoid that sort of empty feeling, or they've been there, but they're overcoming it and they're super resilient. Like, even when they get there, they bounce back out really quickly, and they're good at filling that void that tends to creep in and set the right course and keep it. And whether that be in their life or their organization or their business, they just don't stay off track for very long. And I'm contrasting that with my own experiences. Somehow one day, just finding myself in this miserable underlying state of just feeling aimless, despite thinking I was following the model at church and at home and at work in all my different roles. And I was seeing the strikingly sad similarities in so many discussions with great people who seem to be staying in this state of chaos and confusion and frustration and weightlessness or drifting. I don't know exactly what the perfect word is there for it. But if you have experienced it, you know what it feels like. And if you have people close to you, you know what they're going through. And it doesn't mean that they have some kind of mental illness or disorder. It's just something that's happened. And it's like we took our eye off the ball somehow and we didn't know that we were doing that. And a lot of people, they like myself, like we just learned to wear the mask really well. And we're on this never ending, exhausting cycle of finding some momentum and excitement and hope and faithful action, only to lose it again. And the peaks and valleys just get too drastic and it's exhausting. Instead of this steady upward course with some little peaks and valleys, it's like you're at Mount Everest and then you're down in the Marianas Trench over and over and over again. And so I said to myself, enough is enough. And I turned my curiosity loose on figuring this out. I turned to God. That's always the center of anything that I do, because I don't think that I think every single human is flawed. And I believe that there's a God and a Father in heaven who loves us and who is perfect and all knowing. And we are here to try to turn to him, right? So, and I believe that a lot of the things that are out there in the world that are people are putting out there are not bad. I just don't think they're perfect. And I think that God lets us have some of these messages because he wants us to learn all for our own, right? So I've read so many books on self-improvement, on different skill sets, on communications, I've taken courses and I've paid tens of thousands of dollars for coaches. And I don't regret that at all, by the way. It's been a absolutely great experience. Way better than I ever imagined it would be. It's like I paid them to be my coach, and seen and compared multiple of their kind of different proven frameworks. And I've had lots of proactive therapy and counseling. And I've spoken with my uber successful mentors who've had these consistently happy careers and marriages and businesses. Not to say that it's been all roses, right? But they've been able to do it without compromising their integrity and their values and their moral compass. And when I decide to slay a dragon, I don't ever go halfway. I consider everything. And I don't ever count on just one source, because no matter how many letters they have behind their name, all of it's created or written by a flawed human, as I said. And you should not either, as I was saying before, never accept anything blindly or on its own. Be the judge and jury. Demand multiple witnesses and evidence before you make any judgment call. And I only say that because I've trusted things blindly. And I think that's part of where it's easy to get off course. You're so excited about this thing that seems so great, but you're not cross-referencing everything to see what common patterns or themes or principles showed up in all the different sources, and made sure that it was not contrary to what you believe in your faith in God or Jesus Christ. And so what I did is I looked back on times that I felt really fulfilled and unstoppable. And I analyzed the crap out of what was present in those things, or what had changed, or what I had changed, or what had changed in me or the world or my environment. And I whiteboarded everything. I gut checked everything. I ran it past my sweet wife, who bravely told me when I was jumping to conclusions that made no sense that I wasn't making any sense, because you can't just get stuck inside of your own head. You need somebody, a second set of eyes, and people that you trust to shoot you straight, right? A lot of people in executive, like high positions, that they don't have anyone like that, because everyone just wants to tell them what they want to hear. So if you're listening to this and that's you, consider it. I ran it through every filter, and I tried to simplify it, even when it seemed like I couldn't go any simpler. So like I said, it's like I put it in that, it's like I distilled this down to its base elements. Like, what is it that truly brings fulfillment, and how do you keep it? And is there other ways of thinking about this that are aligned with what I already believe? And again, I'm still a flawed human. So I said, God, can you please help me see what I'm not able to see through my own efforts? And I believe I've been able to isolate it down to just a few things. One, just kind of a guiding principle, and then a formula. And the guiding principle is that the people and the organizations that really are able to keep everything on track indefinitely have a way of always refreshing their commitment and staying laser focused on why they do anything. The ones who've had either the presence of mind or a system built in to remind them to consciously go back not to what their goals are or what is expected of them, but one layer further. They had the courage and the humility to slow down so they could speed up. They said, time out. Let's go back not to what do I need to do to hit my goals, but to what do I want? Like, really, what do I want, or what do we want? And more importantly, why? And I'm just going to go on a rant for a minute here because I want to call out a potential pitfall that I've fallen into only in the last 10 years have I been able to identify and consciously avoid this. Sometimes you hear these principles over and over and over again, whether it's like the same influencers or self-development people on social media or, work or whatever it is, like they say the same thing over and over again. And when you hear something, and it maybe sounded like a breakthrough for you when you first heard it, but then through so much repetition or your own pride or your ego or your fear or the way, like maybe you really were into it and the way the world around you reacts to it and devalues it because it's beat to death, they start to turn their nose up to it. And that can rub off on you and keep you from ever unlocking its potential. Like, imagine somebody handed you a gold bar and said, hey, you're going to want to hang on to this. I promise it's worth something. And you said, oh, great, thanks. And you just didn't quite understand why it was worth something because nobody had ever told you what a gold bar was, or you hadn't seen it put into practice. And then you're carrying this thing around and people are saying, it says this is a ridiculous example, but this is kind of how it works with certain principles. People are saying, oh, that's false. That's fool's gold. That's not worth anything. And so you kind of hide it away and you're like, oh, I don't know. I'll just use this as a paperweight. So even though it may be powerful beyond your wildest dreams, these kind of self-development, self-help principles, and they're just right there for the taking, you might not be unlocking them. Because I know that lots of self-improvement on the subject of what I was just talking about, I know that lots of self-improvement people and personal development experts have maybe worn out the concept of focusing on your why. Like, I can feel some eye rolls on the other side of this. It's like, oh, this again. So resist the urge to mentally jump ahead and just think I'm regurgitating their stuff. Give yourself the gift of being open to potentially having this take on a new meaning or finding something you can use here that you hadn't thought of. So again, the key principle of the people that have been able to keep fulfillment is they don't just stay so focused on their goals. They say, when things are off or even if they're not off yet, they'll say, let's go back not to what do I need to do to hit my goals. I'm working on that. But at the very core of everything, what do I want? And more importantly, why? And this word why, this is one of those words that is a secret hidden right under our noses. When I started this podcast, I told you there'd be some of these. And this one's literally right under our noses. Think who uses the word why more than anyone? Kids. If you have ever met a kid or spent any significant amount of time around kids, this is like their go-to word. And when they realize they could play the why game, it can get really annoying. But did you ever stop to pay attention to how much it requires you to think at another level to be able to keep answering them until it makes sense? Because I used to just think my kids were doing it to try to be funny or because they saw that episode of Bluey, and that is what they were doing sometimes. But then I just got curious and I started just answering them and not being like, because stop doing that. I already told you. I was just going a level deeper. If it still felt like a logical place to ask why again, I was pretending, or not pretending. I was in my mind, I was saying, all right, what if an adult was saying why here? And I couldn't just dismiss them. Like, would this be a logical place to say why again? Like, as in that's not good enough. Tell me the deeper reason, or let's get it down to its essence. And usually, even my most strong-willed child will say, "Oh, okay. If I can distill it down to the root cause of why or why not." And so that's what I've done in my process of slaying this dragon. I had to find it. And the way I found it was by casting every sort of net imaginable and then seeing what patterns were in all of what I had collected and then asking why those patterns are there. And then if the answer I came up with was not good enough or simple enough, I said, but why? And if this is still not making sense where I'm going with this, I promise I'm taking it somewhere, but think about just any goal you have. If you say to yourself, instead of just, why do I have this goal? Go back and say, what do I want? And some people may say, I just want to be rich. I'm sick of being down in the dumps and poor. It's like, okay, why do you want to be rich? Why do you want to be famous? Well, because then I won't have all of these challenges that I've had for my whole life. It's like, okay, why don't you want the challenges? And it's like, well, that's a rude question. Like, it's obvious. It's suffering. It's terrible. I see everyone around me. And if you keep going, it doesn't come to, I want to be rich isn't a real why. The real why is I don't want to just be in survival mode all the time. Or I want to survive. Maybe that's just the first step. But there's usually something deeper. And I've done that with every single thing I could think of. And it's three things that make up what make people fulfilled. As I mentioned before, survival is its own animal and it's instinctual, but fulfillment, which is kind of where we go once we have our basic stuff met, only has three things. And you can imagine it like if you had three lenses and the sun was shining through one or two of them, they may not be powerful enough to create a laser or start a bonfire, let's say. But if you line them all up and the sun's shining through all three of them equally, then you've got what you need. So I won't keep you any longer on this. The three things are things that we want to do better and have each one work to magnify the other. So everybody wants growth or some form of progress. They want enjoyment and connection. Quality of growth, enjoyment, and connection. I want to improve all three of those. And a lot of times what happens that screws up the fulfillment formula is we focus only on one of those. Or we focus on one of them, whether it's in our life, our business, our marriage, our relationships, whatever it is, we do a low quality version of one of those. Low quality growth without enjoyment and connection is a recipe for future disaster. If you're only focusing on enjoyment and you love the people that you're around, your connection's great, but no one's growing, then that relationship it's not going to have as much meaning or impact in your life. So having all three of these things be better is super important. And enjoyment, it's like, okay, what does that word mean? Well, everybody talks about enjoy the journey. And that's what we're talking about here is not this cheap enjoyment that just is kind of fickle and fleeting, but memories and experiences and things that you share with other people that aren't just this low quality enjoyment. Like we're talking about not things that make you feel good for a moment, but things that build your life and build who you are. And the connection relies on enjoyment. A good relationship is not just about making sure two people get as much as they can out of it. The way that they get as much as they can out of it is by enjoying being together, by enjoying doing work together, and by enjoying going through challenges and trials together because you're together. So everything that we focus on is going to still have that element of curiosity and perspective, because that's how we get to the bottom of things. But the true fulfillment formula is growth times enjoyment times connection times quality. And they multiply each other. If you remove one, then you won't have enough to get to the spot that you're trying to get to. This is the basis for everything that I'm doing now. How do we have higher meaning and impact in our life? Is this. And if you feel like you're lacking in any one of these areas, if you're trying to find or make sense of this sort of thing, I recommend you turn to your go-to thing that's always helped you, whether that be your faith or some spiritual thing. Focus on your internal compass as you hear all kinds of different people trying to tell you what you should do. And if you're really ready to change and you really want to make a change and you try to do it all by yourself and it's just not working, or you've fixed a lot of stuff on your own, but you've now gotten to the point where everything that you can do on your own, you've already done on your own, then reach out to me. We'll talk through it and see if it's possible that I could help you with some coaching or some of the different groups and communities that we're building. Just go to changewithnate.com. That's changewithnate.com. And you can book a call, answer a few questions on that page, and we'll see so that I know what we're talking about when we chat. Get you on my calendar, 30 minutes. I'll see if I can point you in the right direction if I'm not a fit for you, but hope you'll take the opportunity either now or later, whenever you're truly ready. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode. I love the chance to make your day better in some way, whether that ends up being just a quick reset that you needed to change things up, or even just a laugh or some fresh perspective. If you're getting value out of it, can you please do me a favor and share it with someone else? Because as more people find and listen to the show, I'm able to bring more good stuff more often. It is the fuel to the bonfire. Also, I'd love to hear your feedback and any thoughts or ideas or questions you have so we can be more connected and make the show even better with your input and your inspiration. The quickest way to do that is to send a message to my Instagram handle at WayOfTheBonfire, which is also included in the show notes. And if you just want to avoid accidentally scrolling on social media, you can send me an email at nate@wayofthebonfire.com. And you know it, but make sure you click that follow button so you can catch new episodes as soon as they're available. Keep tending the bonfire, and we'll see you on the next one.